Hello everyone, and welcome to our new Shiny Lee's office. And welcome to our first lightning talk centered around celebrating women in tech. I'm Val, and I will be your host for this evening. But fortunately for you, you will not be hearing too much from me because I have the lovely Sarah and Poonam, and I also have Philippa and Carla doing a talk remotely. First off, we're going to start with Sarah, and she's going to start us with
gender data bias, or an average woman in a world designed for men. So, hello, I am an average woman. Am I in the right place? There we go. I am an average woman. I'm average height. I like to think I'm exceptional, but really I'm not very. But I do have an average man here. Thank you, average man. Dave doesn't know what he's up here for. It's nothing too scary. So you can see that Dave is different from me. Dave is taller than me, stronger than me, has a deeper voice.
Indeed.
And has bigger hands. Oh, look at those hands. He is not the same as me. Thank you, Dave.
You're very welcome.
So, how is the world designed for Dave and not for me? Well, this all started off when I was on a Zoom call. So I am the Scrum Master here at Northcoders, which means that I run a lot of meetings. And in the course of these meetings, I was having trouble making my voice heard. So I would be speaking, and whenever one of the rest of my team, all men, would talk, it would cut my mic and prioritize their voices instead. And this would happen even when they weren't the people who were directly talking. They could be in a room with a man talking in the background, and background man would be beamed into the meeting, cutting off whatever I said. And I said to the rest of my team, this is sexism. And they said, no, Sarah, it's not sexism. Like, there must be a problem with your internet connection, or maybe your microphone isn't very good, despite the fact I was using exactly the same equipment as them. And I said, no, this is sexism, and I'm going to prove it to you. And that's the genesis of this talk. So look out, team. So I started looking at software that detects speech, and it's 70% more likely to recognize male speech than it is to recognize female speech. And that's despite the fact that studies have shown that women have significantly higher levels of speech intelligibility than men. They use longer vowel sounds, they speak more slowly. It should be the other way around, but it's not. And why is that? And the problem is with the data sets that we use to train these voice recognition technologies. They are overwhelmingly male. The most popular one, with thousands and thousands of voices, has 69% male voices. And when we train machines on biased data, we get biased machines. Now, of course, the gender data gap is not just a problem for me and my Zoom calls. It gets a lot more serious. I know it's a big problem, but it gets even bigger. So when we look at medical trials, 90% of them exclusively use male subjects, so as not to have to account for women and their fluctuating hormones. And that means that medical care for women is much poorer than it is for men. If you're a woman, you're 50% more likely to die of a heart attack because your symptoms present differently to men, and because you respond to drugs differently than men do, but the research has been done on men. When you look at car crash test dummies, the EU test requirements say that all tests must be carried out on an average male dummy. And of course, as we've seen with Dave, that's not the same size as me. And that means that the headrests don't work for women, the seats don't work for women, the seatbelts don't work for women, and a woman is 71% more likely to be injured in a car crash, despite the fact that men have more crashes. And in fact, when a woman dummy was introduced in 2011, but only in the passenger seat, because we all know that women don't drive, the rating of some cars dropped from a 5-star safety rating to one where some of the seats had a 40% chance of death at 35 miles per hour crashes. So it is a matter literally of life and death. And what can be done about this? So the key thing is to include women at 3 key stages in product development: user research, user testing, and production monitoring. So user research. Now, my key message here is when you're doing user research, talk to women. And second part of this, listen to what they have to say. So people find it really difficult to see problems that they don't experience. When I had my problem with my Zoom calls, my colleagues just couldn't believe that it was sexism because it's not something that they've really had to deal with in their everyday life. When Apple brought out a comprehensive health tracker that they rolled out with all of their smartwatches and iPhones, it included so many different types of health tracking, but it didn't include a period tracker. But because they hadn't asked women what they wanted from a health tracker. The second thing is user testing. Your testing is only as good as the pool of testers that you have. And that means that it's really important when you're developing a product, don't just use the developers as your test subjects, particularly in tech when they're likely to be overwhelmingly male. And be aware of the data sets that you're using and any bias that they have built into them. When some researchers retrained voice recognition software using non-sexist data, so equal numbers of male and female voices, they decreased the bias within it by 2/3. And the third thing is production monitoring. Is everything working as you expect it to? So for this, I want to talk about emojis. So the Unicode Consortium, the people who create the codes upon which emojis are based, thought that they were doing everything right. They developed all of their codes in gender-neutral language. They would say, make an emoji for a runner, make an emoji from a police officer. But the overwhelming result was that there were basically no female emojis. Emojis were almost 100% male. And that's because although they were sending things out in gender-neutral language, they were sending it to designers who would then say, oh, a runner. Here's a nice picture of a man running. Oh, a police officer. Here's a nice picture of a male policeman. And so in a sexist world, being gender neutral is not necessarily the way to achieve equality. And so the way the Unicode Consortium fixed that was they started specifying the gender. They said, make an emoji of a female runner, make an emoji of a female police officer. And that idea of making sure that you acknowledge the existence of women comes into data collection as well. Like when you're collecting your user feedback on your product, make sure that you are separating it by gender. If you don't check in with women's experience directly, you won't know what the issues are. So there we go. My key message, it seems like an obvious one, is don't forget that women exist and make sure that you're including women when you're researching, when you're testing, and in the users of your product, because women are people too. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We are here and we are here to stay.
Yes, exactly. We've been around since the dawn of time.
We've got surely some questions for yourself. If we could have the live stream up. No questions so far? Cool. Okay. Well, if we were to, lots of celebrations, lots of claps, lots of people loving what they heard. Well, loving is probably loving that the message is being sent out.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, if we were to have any questions for yourself later on, I'll shoot some questions towards you. But up next, I would like to introduce Philippa, who's going to be joining us from York with children's toys and the gender imbalance in tech. Welcome,
yes.
Philippa.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeedy. If you could start sharing my screen now. Thank you very much indeed, James. So, hello, I'm Philippa. I'm one of the mentors at Northcoders, and I'm going to talk to you about children's toys and the gender imbalance in tech. So let me start with where the inspiration from this talk came from. So I used to be a primary school teacher, so I have lots of experiences with children between the ages of 4 and 11. I am someone who watches an inordinate amount of children's TV, considering that I am a childless adult, and I am someone who cannot help but observe everything with a critical feminist eye. So while watching children's TV, what particularly irks me and riles me are the adverts for the children's toys in between the cartoons, and just how gendered they are. So when I'm watching these adverts, it is blindingly obvious to me that one of the reasons that there is such a gender imbalance in tech is down to children's toys. So let me show you a couple of images from my cursory search of Google using the terms girls' toys and boys' toys. So the images on the top were what came up when I searched girls' toys, and the images at the bottom what came up when I searched boys' toys. And when I look at these pictures, all I can think about is how explicitly gendered they are. All of those gender stereotypes are exploited. So for the girls' toys, it's all about childcare and homemaking, this pink being an overwhelming theme, these appearance-based toys like the hairdressing set. Whereas for boys, they're science-minded. They fuel a child's curiosity. They're more action-based. They have got this more blue theme running through them. And children and adults alike, we're bombarded with these images, be it toys, adverts, TV, movies, pencil cases, lunchboxes, conversations with friends, family, teachers. And the message is pretty much the same from all of these places. The message is telling children what is appropriate for a girl and what is appropriate for a boy. And girls aren't seeing themselves represented in huge swathes of children's toys, meaning that they aren't having those same experiences in childhood, developing the same skills, the same interests as boys are. And that's something that I think is meaning they're missing out on real opportunities in a huge career sector. So studies have shown that by the age of 7 or 8, children have already absorbed ideas about what jobs men and women are supposed to have. And these ideas are only compounded by the toys they see in the shops or on adverts on TV. A study by the Institute for Engineering and Technology, they did a study of search engines and toy retailers' websites, and they found that of the STEM toys available, 31% were listed specifically for boys, whereas only 11% were listed for girls. And this is only taking into account those which were explicitly listed for a particular gender, not taking into account how these toys were marketed and the coding of these toys. And when I say coding, I mean using, for example, this pink color to market it to say that it's for a girl, and blue and whatnot to say this toy is for a boy, even without having to say on the box, this is a boy's toy, this is a toy for girls. So this isn't just an issue on websites and search engines. A study from last year found that in TV adverts for STEM toys, only 43% of them featured a girl in them. So over half of adverts for any sort of science, technology, engineering, and maths toys don't feature a girl. This, however, is a huge improvement from the 2015 data when only 9% of adverts for STEM toys featured a girl. So with over 90% of adverts for any sort of scientific toy didn't feature a girl. And there's clearly an imbalance in the way toys are marketed to children, but is there any link between those toys and the careers that these children will choose in adulthood? Luckily for this talk, for you, for us, for the next 8 minutes, yes, there is. I thought it was all in my head, but no, research has been done. Studies have identified this link, that the underrepresentation of women in tech and the toys that children play with, it's a real thing. So this first quote comes from a study in 2016, stating that societal stereotypes driving these gendered listings, i.e. the listings of toys and adverts and so on, could be having a knock-on effect for the next generation of engineers, especially girls, impacting their future career choices. This second quote comes from an article written in October of last year, which states that gendered children's toys create harmful and outdated stereotypes, discouraging girls away from lucrative and rewarding STEM careers. I don't know whether you have a favourite quote from a scientific journal, but this is mine. It really gets to the crux of the matter, that the experiences that children have through play in childhood, through the toys that they have and interact with, has an impact on their interests, their skills, and then what they ultimately choose to do in later life. So if two studies, 5 years apart, were drawing identical conclusions, what is currently being done to revert these links? So again, in October of last year, California became the first US state to legally require large shops to have a gender-neutral toy section. So still a section for boys, still a section for girls, but there also had to be a gender-neutral toy section. And the rationale behind this was that the authors of the law had noticed that there had been a proliferation of STEM-based toys in the boys section and toys geared towards homemaking, childcare and fashion in the girls section. And the same segregation still exists in adulthood in the world of work. So there's a common argument that comes up against the degendering of toys. Why not just let children play with whatever they're interested in? Girls have a natural interest in dolls and boys have a natural interest in science toys. But I think the reason for these seemingly natural interests is because children aren't making these decisions in a vacuum. As I said before, given the number of messages that children receive from across society, a child has got to be a real trailblazer to step out of that gender stereotype, to cross the aisle in the toy shop and peruse the set of toys that aren't for them. Or they've got to be a real trailblazer at school or nursery to pick up a toy and play with it when they and the rest of their peers and classmates know that that toy is not for them. The fantastic organisation Let Toys Be Toys makes a really excellent point that even if the marketing of a toy isn't enough to put a child off playing with it, then the potential bullying, name calling, teasing that might result from that really innocent act of picking up a toy that they actually really want to play with is more likely to put them off playing with that toy. They're not thinking about, oh, if I picked up this robot, maybe it will inspire me to have a career in robotics. They're more likely thinking about what their friends will say. And they also pick up on this link of children's toys and the gender imbalance in certain areas. And they say that these stereotypical notions can then be very hard to shift and can, for instance, feed into the low numbers of girls taking STEM subjects and men entering professions such as childcare. And this is another excellent point, that all genders are missing out on equally valuable experiences. And I feel just as passionate about boys being encouraged to play with dolls and hairdressing sets, homemaking role play, and thinking about all of the skills like language and empathy and social skills that comes with that sort of play. But because this is a tech-based talk, I've chosen to focus on one side of the argument. But really, if all children were given equal messaging about what toys are suitable for them, i.e. all toys are suitable for all children, then only good things can come from it. Additionally, it's worth noting that in the research that currently exists, non-binary adults and non-binary children aren't represented in the discussion. when really they should be at the center of the conversation and the justification for degendering toys. So hopefully that's another thing that will change as this conversation progresses. But in summary, the degendering of toys can only create a more open, tolerant, and equal society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philippa. I think your passion was matching my own. We were here rooting for you on the seats, and I could see both Sarah and Poonam just like nodding along with you. Like, this doesn't concern just women, right? It's about men as well. It's about all genders. It's about all people missing out on very valuable experience. And of course, this is a talk celebrating women in tech. And perhaps with Sarah's talk, we've seen what the outcomes and what the current situation is of not having, well, rather having biased data. And perhaps you've offered us where the root lies, like how our society markets and how we stick to these traditional roles, which really have no place in our modern society.
Absolutely.
Do we have any questions for Philippa, though? James is nodding. Cool. From Harriet, from Has, a question for Philippa and Sarah and any other speakers. Are there any books or resources you would recommend for people who want to reduce the gender bias in both testing and product development? Whilst we have Philippa on the line, can I direct this question for yourself first?
Yes, so the research that I've done, in fact, I do have a slide with some of the articles and things that I've read that have contributed to this talk. So I'm happy to share that out. I know I'm not sharing my screen at the minute. Yeah, so just sort of a small collection there of articles that I've had a look at and some data there too. But in terms of books, I know that Let Toys Be Toys, they did a gender diary, I believe, of their experiences with their own children, which I think is available on their website. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. When we upload these individual talks to YouTube, we would also include the sources. We'll send those out, so people watching this later on, you'd be able to gain access to those links as well. Sarah, what about you? Have you found any resources yourself which would be helpful to address the gender bias?
Yeah, so I think a really key one is Invisible Women, which I cannot remember the author's name off the top of my head, but I've been reading it all week and it's been making me very angry. And that's all about the ways in which women are missing from the data that we use to analyze the world and produce products and things, and you know, some ideas going forward for how that can potentially be corrected. But it's astonishing how endemic a problem it is.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Specifically about women in tech, a couple of years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting the author Shannon Valler, and I think she's actually presently working as an ethicist at Google. So that career path also exists. And that is, she wrote The Virtues in Tech, or something to that effect. I will also put some resources, and Sarah will include this book you mentioned as well in the description. But there is, I believe, one more question for Philippa. That is from our own Dave. Do you think that children should be encouraged to play with toys marketed for the other gender? Or do you believe that it is marketing itself that should be more neutral? Both?
What a good question. I think the latter, that if there weren't all these stereotypes attached to the toys themselves, then more children would be open to playing with them, and that prejudice that particularly boys have when playing with a girl's toy is, I believe, far worse than when a girl chooses to play with a boy's toy. I think it is currently much harder for boys to step out of their gender stereotype, but I think making toys less gendered, degendered entirely is what I would go for.
Yeah, absolutely, and also having people around children's their responses, not to, oh, maybe don't pick that one.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Cool. And on screen we have the author of Invisible Women.
That is the author of Invisible Women.
Thank you very much, Scott. Okay. Unless we have any further questions, James, no, that's perfect. Well, Poonam, it is all in your hands now. You're going to talk to us about why the tech industry needs more whistleblowers. So things do go wrong in the industry, as we've already found out from Sarah, and we probably found out where this comes from Philippa. What do we do when it goes wrong?
What do we do? Right, am I standing? I have no idea where I'm going.
Slides. One moment for James.
This is okay. This gets me enough time to work out my nervous sugar rush energy that I've got going on.
Yeah,
It's all good. It's all good.
Just beforehand.
Absolutely inhaled those.
Okay.
Awesome.
Here you are, and here is the clicker.
Amazing.
Thank you very much, James.
Okay. Okay, it's that way around. Cool. Cool. So, I have a lot to say in this talk, and I hope it's not too long, but if it is, feel free to emoji in the chat, and I will never see it ever again, and that's okay. I knew when we were doing a talk, a lightning talks on women in tech, I wanted to talk about the problems that can occur when women work in tech and what happens when people try to call it out for what it is, which is a problem. I got a bit of a self-gratuitous tweet on the screen, which is from earlier this week when I'd done a lot of reading about this topic, and I realized the tech industry absolutely needs whistleblowers right now. Like, it's absolutely integral. As a new industry, as a exploding industry and a very wealthy industry, we need people to be able to call out issues that might otherwise be swept under the carpet. And I hope this works. Okay, cool. So let me start off with a definition. This is from the UK Gov website. You are officially a whistleblower if you work in a company and you report some kind of wrongdoing. Very vague, and rightfully so. It might be something you've seen at work, but it's not always. The thing you disclose must be in public interest, and all the cases I'm going to talk about today are definitely within that bracket. And you should be protected by law if you're a whistleblower. That means people who whistleblow should not lose their job, they should not face retaliation, they should not be gagged by NDAs or like agreements when they leave or anything like that that will stop them from speaking out. So they should be absolutely protected. Sadly, in the cases I'm about to talk about, we're not really seeing that. Also really worth noting that in the cases we're going to see, they're all based in America, and they're all predominantly based in California, where Silicon Valley exists, funnily enough. And it's shocking how little protection there is for tech workers in California. So definitely a massive red flag if you're aiming for the Silicon Valley. I am going to change my slide. Cool. So you know what a whistleblower is now, but why does the tech sector need whistleblowers? Why does it need it? Well, the tech sector's incredibly new, in my eyes. It's blowing up. Apparently, according to recent government figures, in the UK, the digital sector accounts for 7.7% of the economy, and it's growing six times more or faster than an average growth rate in the economy. So it's absolutely incredible. And it's vital to our everyday uses, right? Like everyone here has used tech today to get from A to B. We're communicating over technology. Our medical systems are all software-based. We are using internet banking, and well, banking is entirely reliant on tech. Businesses need it. Education, especially in the pandemic world, it's absolutely insane, the idea of a world without technology companies, to be honest. And with that power comes great responsibility, right? And what if we paired that responsibility with a very large amount of wealth and legal teams and PR companies and marketing and all these things that can make a big, powerful tech company that everyone needs incredibly elusive and able to sweep a lot of things under carpets and silence people from talking about bad things they might be doing but aren't really anyone's problems according to them. Whistleblowers do a really special thing where they pull back the magical curtain, so to speak, and expose these cracks in our tech industry for what they are. They are cracks, they need to be fixed, they're not things we should be ignoring, and it's in the public interest to do that because technology is something we all use. So we all have the right to be informed on what we invest in and what we buy, and also to be informed on how what we use can be harmful or perpetuate very horrible trends in the real world. So, what is my next slide? Let's find out. Cool. So, what could we use whistleblowers for, or what could whistleblowers be useful for? Well, they can be really useful to highlight gaps in protection for employees who do blow whistles, which a lot of these cases do. Especially now where it's coming out more and more, it's a very new process in a lot of ways, and we're seeing a lot of ways that people can fall through cracks and be really harmed if they ever try to speak out. It's also to highlight hypocrisy. Companies have marketing teams and they can say whatever they like to us, but do they actually mean what they say, or are they talking a load of B? Who knows? And that is what whistleblowers are able to do. So the first woman I would like to talk about is Ifeoma Azoma, who was at Pinterest for 2 years. And in 2020, she left under circumstances that were absolutely horrific. She was harassed, she was doxxed. There was no punishment for people who were abusing her in her teams. And she had absolutely had enough. She was already campaigning for a pay rise that never happened, a pay rise to equate her to people who were also on her level of skill and responsibility. So, yeah, not asking for much. She had already done a lot of amazing policy work in Pinterest. So she was a public policy specialist, and she advocated for the removal of using former slave plantations and promoting them as wedding venues on the platform, and also the crackdown on medical misinformation, which also involved anti-vaxxing sentiments. A lot of her problems started when she suggested that content warnings were put on the posts that were associated with a conservative commentator called Ben Shapiro, who was also associated with far-right sentiments. And that is when she started getting harassed by colleagues. Ifeoma blew the whistle when she had had enough of the hypocrisy of Pinterest. So Pinterest had come out publicly in support of Black Lives Matter in 2020, and that was about 2 months after she had filed a complaint about harassment and a toxic workplace to the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Remember that, you're going to hear about that a lot. And she had to sign an NDA when she settled with Pinterest, when she left, and she was essentially gagged until Pinterest had come out with their support for the Black Lives Matters protests. At this point, Ifeoma was like, "Nuh-uh, we're not going to stand for this. You absolutely do not represent that kind of support. You do not stand by your word, and we are going to sort of out you for all the sort of inappropriate and harmful sort of workplace practices that you have perpetuated." So she came out, and people came out in their droves to support her. There was a massive wave of worker support in Pinterest for calling out the mistreatment of Black women in the workplace. There was a $50 million budget earmarked for diversity, inclusion, and equality initiatives in Pinterest because of the whistleblowing that she had done. I think there was a case that went to court, a lawsuit, to try them for being a trash company, let's be honest. And it enabled other people to step in their wake. And it wasn't just her, there was another woman, Erica Banks, who would also come out. And people were able to come out and say, "I've been discriminated against and I'm not having it." And I think there was a £22 million settlement, settlement that came after they had left, that went to a chief operating officer who had experienced gender discrimination. So Ifeoma, bit of legend. She also went on to create what is incredible, some incredible work, the Tech Worker Handbook, which is to aid other workers who want to come out publicly about harmful practices that have happened in the workplace. And she came up with a quote that absolutely summarizes why we need whistleblowers in the industry. So would recommend you check out the Tech Worker Handbook. I keep pressing the laser button, that's weird. So what else can whistleblowers do? They can support other workers going through the same experiences. So this lady, Cher Scarlett, incredible activist. She has worked for Starbucks, Activision Blizzard, and Apple from 2020 to 21. Cher has been a advocate for colleagues all through her career, really. When she joined Apple, she joined a environment of secrecy and hush-hush kind of a situation, which started with their products, right? They don't want to get their product secrets out before releases, but had actually leaked into the silencing of colleagues when they're experiencing harmful behaviors like discrimination, wage inequality, harmful working conditions, inability to remote work in a pandemic, which is strange, and general sort of harmful silencing of that sort. So Cher, when she joined Apple, she became a big advocate for sort of standing up for her colleagues' rights. She helped people get pay rises. She helped them get remote working rights. She helped them get help for the discrimination they'd experienced. And ultimately, she was told to stop talking publicly about Apple's internal issues. And when she was sort of targeted in that way, she then became a target for harassment and ultimately doxing, which is a really common theme with these women. So she was whistleblowing throughout her time. She got harassed for it. And then she fully came out and she was like, this secretive society that is Apple needs to end. They're perpetuating a lot of discriminatory practices and it's not on. She also called them out for their need to, get people to sign NDAs when they leave for discrimination reasons. That was a sentence for sure. So Apple would get people to sign NDAs if they left under circumstances where they were experiencing harm, and then they would be gagged from ever whistleblowing or calling them out or anything like that. And Cher outed them for that. She also called them out for them saying publicly that they didn't do that, which was interesting. And she also exposed a practice within Apple where when people left, Apple would change the registered role that they were under in credit registries or background checking to an associate, which meant that ultimately their background checks failed, and a lot of them got sort of ripped off in the next job search that they went through because they came back as failed background checks, which is a ridiculous practice. Like, why would you do that? So yeah, Cher is pretty incredible. She also designed the one times engineer, which is a sort of a flip side to the idea of a 10 times engineer, who is a person that does a billion things at once and is able to code, be an influencer, do coding projects on the side, and also be really, really unhelpful to other people who are entering the industry. Whereas a one times engineer goes home, shuts the laptop, and is a general nice person. So she made a manifesto for that. Would recommend checking that out for some good vibes. What else am I going to say on Cher? Nothing. I'm saying nothing because we're moving on. And this is a big one. This is to give attention to unethical practices and products. So we've seen before that tech isn't always right. It's sometimes designed in really flawed ways. And people who work on these products ought to be the people that call it out, right? If they're noticing a trend, if they're noticing a problem, if they think, wait, we shouldn't really be releasing this to the public as a tool that will build wider systems, they should be able to say something. Well, apparently not the case in the situation of Timnit Gebru, who worked for Google for about 2 years. And in those 2 years, she was very into sort of ethical tech. So making sure we're not using AI that is actually perpetuating harmful trends. So for example, facial recognition that is used in law enforcement, but actually has a really low accuracy rate on recognizing people of color accurately, and especially women of color, which can be really problematic if you're giving it to the police and saying, yeah, cool, use this AI. Timnit actually was reaching sort of the end of her tenure at Google. She was already kind of thinking about going into research. And in 2020, she released or wrote, co-authored a paper about a large language, what was it called? I'd love to know. I don't know. A large language AI, which was used in the Google search engines. And essentially, she and other authors from Google said, look, this AI is kind of gonna give some unknown biased results and also might deceive people without us knowing. So maybe let's do a double take on that. Google responded and said, please scrub this paper of any Google affiliations, please. And she asked why and who told her to do that, please. And they said no. And she ultimately was fired for questioning why her paper that passed reviews and general sort of checks for a research paper was so unacceptable to Google. I think it was because Google didn't like the fact that their technology was being put in a bad light, but it's still a bit contested. The result of her whistleblowing, because she obviously spoke publicly about this silencing of critical conversation on Google technology, was that everyone had eyes on Google and they started seeing the technology for what it was, which is new stuff that needed work on it and wasn't going to be perfect for release. It also drew attention to the treatment of Black women, which is a massive, massive trend in the tech industry, and how they are mistreated. There were like 12,000 Google employees and 15,000 academics that all backed her and said, look, you just fired this woman and she definitely didn't resign. But Google to this day are being pretty weak about it. What it did do was it drew attention. It made people more aware of why Google isn't the ideal tech company. And it also means that any further DEI initiatives from Google are going to be questioned a lot harder. But Timnit's pretty legendary. So yeah, this is kind of a summary of what the paper was basically saying. I'm definitely over time, so we're going to skip this slide. And the final one was to keep the public safe and informed. And this person I'm not going to go into very much, Frances Haugen. She was famously outed Facebook's internal documents and procedures and presentations, essentially saying, look, Facebook's algorithm is extremely dangerous and not safe for our young people or for places that are experiencing tensions of any kind. It was perpetuating like ethnic violence and stuff like that. So terrible stuff going on, and Facebook just allowed it because it worked in their interest. This is essentially what's going. She's currently working with Congress to basically say, look, you need to be harder on tech companies and what they're allowed to do in the real world. She's also a legend. So other names, other people, there are like so many whistleblowers in the world that have done incredible work, but also got absolutely decimated in career and reputation because companies don't like to be called out at the moment. Be the change you want to see. Like, I just think we need more people to be able to say when something is wrong, and it's not easy, and I hope it will get easier, and with more people doing the work. Who knows, maybe it'll be really good, easy to call the company out and be like, you're not doing something right, and also keep your job. That would be great. And that's all I kind of want to say. A bit of a whistle stop tour, but thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. That
You're
was
welcome.
excellent. I love hearing all about these incredible women in tech who have stood their ground despite what they have lost and continue to do so. And I think later on in the month, when we have some more lightning talks at the end of March, so something for all of you watching to be looking out for, we're going to revisit this idea of whistleblowers and name some even more, well, not even more, but equally as awesome people in the tech industry who have blown the whistle. Do we have any questions for Brunan, please? Yes, we do. Do you think that the requirement for whistleblowers regarding the mistreatment of employees is destined to remain while tech companies are free to enforce NDAs in relation to legitimate secrets?
That's a really good question. And like, there are NDAs exist for a reason, right? Sometimes you really can't release information about products and this, that, the other, which I think is fair enough, right? You're, as a business, you're right to do that. But the requirement for whistleblowers sort of to be protected, I think it is destined to, like, that protection for employees is destined to remain. Because NDAs will always exist. That's my idea in the tech industry. So we need like an almost an exit door for people who aren't talking about anything related to like profitable product or anything, but actually ethical issues that are happening in the company. I don't know even if that makes any sense, but like saying words, you know.
I think I get the gist of what you were trying to say. NDAs exist for a reason, and the whistleblowers aren't there aiming to replicate a product or share company product secrets. Like, you don't want this to expose what the M1 chip in an Apple laptop is made out of. But what you do want to know is if there are any ethical concerns within the company, and that's the reason why the protection around whistleblowers has to exist.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Did we have any more questions? Dominic is asking, do you think there's anything an ordinary employee can do to promote whistleblowing in their work environment? What a fantastic question.
That is such a good question. And an ordinary employee, I think what you can do is sort of have open conversations. I feel like it's about talking about problems, not sweeping them under the carpet. If you see something that's wrong, I truly believe, like, say something about it. See what happens when that conversation is opened up, because your rights as an employee shouldn't be like absolutely destroyed for saying something about something. Do you know what I mean? So I think be brave, open those conversations up if you want to. And whistleblowing is such a dramatic word. I think really it should just be called saying your thoughts on a thing and being like, should we, questioning things. That's kind of what it is. So just be brave and talk to your peers. That's what
and I think if someone does blow the whistle, listen to them.
Listen to them. Yeah.
Support
absolutely.
them if you have experienced the same thing.
Yeah.
Add your voice to theirs. And we've got one more question. Fantastic. The questions have really picked up. Philippa would like to jump in live and ask us a question, please.
Oh gosh, I didn't realize I was live. Okay, my question, which I will just read back to you from my YouTube comments. Have you changed your internet preferences or like search engine preferences, your habits, or on like the websites and the apps you use based on the reading that you've done thanks to the whistleblowers?
Yeah, a lot of the things I use, I can't help but use them. So I'm not a Google user as like a priority, and that's been for a while. I use Apple products for work, but I've avoided them historically because I hate their capitalist mindset. And I do use Pinterest for my mood boards, and I think I'm going to question a little bit more about what kind of environment Pinterest kind of creates, especially for the information they spread. So it's definitely made me question more than what I use, more about what I think about where we should work and like that idealized FANG sort of ideology. That's kind of what it's made me question a bit more.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did we have anyone else? No, fantastic. Okay, well, moving on to our final speaker, we have Carla. We're moving further up north, coming from Newcastle. Carla is going to talk to us what happens when we do get things right. Sometimes, occasionally, we get things right. And Carla's here to tell us all about Margaret Hamilton, the woman who put man on the moon.
Thank you so much, Val, for that very cool intro. And I thought about that punchline there. I was gonna leave it as a surprise because I wanted to open this presentation by asking if you have seen this woman. So if you are an internet user, I'm sure you've seen this woman before. Yeah. Do I have my slides on full screen? I'm confused right now. Right. Anyway, so I was browsing the internet like as usual a couple of years ago, and I've seen this image. That was way before I thought of entering the tech field. So I was like, what is this picture? And then I saw the caption. It said, "This is Margaret Hamilton, the software engineer who built the software for the Apollo 11 landing. Next to her is the stack of printed out code she initially hand wrote." So it was amazing for me to see someone, a woman, writing a code, like building something this big, and then like initially handwriting it before it got printed out. So I was like, this woman is inspirational. But then I forgot about it after a couple of years, and now I'm back in tech. Well, I'm now in tech, and I like looked for her again, sort of, and then I actually delved deep into what this woman really is about. So I decided to talk about her today as a way for me to celebrate International Women's Month as well. So yes, we'll talk about Margaret Hamilton, the woman who put man on the moon. Right, so Margaret Elaine Hayfield was born on August 17, 1936 in Indiana. She is a computer scientist, software and systems engineer, and also a business owner. On the picture, the photo on the left is her during during her time in the Apollo space mission. So I really like that picture. And I think, yes, So I want to start with, after basic info, I want to start with the very fun facts, the highlight, all the highlights of this presentation. First one is Margaret is a self-taught programmer. Second one is she helped coin and popularize the term software engineer. Third one is she invented asynchronous programming. I'm so excited. And finally, the Apollo 11 in-flight software is 100% bug-free. So I feel like that is her biggest flex as a software engineer. That is amazing. So now I'm gonna talk about her career before she went on to work at NASA. So this is her official photo at NASA. I decided to use it here because I think it's really cute. So she has a background in mathematics with a minor in philosophy at University of Michigan, and then she transferred to Earlham College, which is in Indiana as well, I think. And then after that, she worked as a researcher at MIT. So she helped develop this weather forecasting software. So back in the day, you couldn't go to school to learn computer science or software development because they weren't established disciplines. So the only way to be a software developer or an engineer is to learn it on the job. So essentially, she's self-taught. And yeah, so she learned it while working at MIT. And then she moved on to work on the semi-automatic ground environment project, which is also at MIT in the Lincoln Lab that worked for the US Air Force. So essentially this project is for, it's a program that detects unfriendly aircraft. And this program is still being used by the US Air Force today. So yeah, at this point, she is still a junior software developer. And it's like a tradition in this lab that you're meant to crack some like very hard programs to crack. And these have never been cracked by anyone, and she managed to crack. She was the very first person, not even a woman, the very first person to solve this challenge. And whew, I'm just so excited. And all these efforts she made in this lab made her a very good candidate for the what's this NASA position at Draper Lab, which worked on the Apollo space mission. So when she was working in this lab, she realized the similarities between the hardware people and the software people. So she was like, it's kind of the same, the way you build something with iron and metal and the way you build software. And some hardware peers also agree with her. So that was the time she and two other people, I think, coined the term software engineer. So yes. And now we'll talk about the Apollo space mission, what went wrong, and how Margaret changed the course of history. So first, I want to talk about my favorite story that I've read about her history working at NASA. It's the Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. So this is her daughter. Her name's Lauren. And Margaret brought her to work one day when Lauren was 4 years old. And apparently Lauren was bored and started pressing random buttons and accidentally, sorry, I forgot to mention that it was, they were doing a flight simulation and Lauren accidentally pressed something that ran a pre-launch program during mid-flight. So apparently it's a bug. This bug causes to erase all navigation data and would crash the computer, and the flight wouldn't be able to come back home because the navigation data is lost. And then Margaret suggests a fix for this. And the higher ups were like, nah, our astronauts are well trained. They wouldn't press the wrong buttons. And besides, that's just extra code to work with, to debug. So it's not worth it. So Margaret was like, okay, let's just add a comment in the program. Do not select PO1 during flight. It's inserted in the program. And I feel like she also spoken to the astronauts, do not do this. But then selects PO1 anyway. Apollo 11, the next flight. What's the name of the astronaut? Jim Lovell. He presses the wrong button, and then the navigation data gets lost, deleted, erased. So what Margaret and her team did was work the next 9 hours, just painstakingly running through the program, the source code, and then sending new navigation data, and then successfully bringing Apollo 8 home. So her obsession with detecting errors and preparing for them made her a very valuable asset at NASA. And I feel less weird now for like handling ridiculous edge cases when I'm building an app, because I'm like, Margaret did this. Yeah. So next is, I want to quickly show the Apollo 11 timeline. So this was in 1969. July 16, it launches from Earth, enters the moon's orbit on the 19th, and then lands on the 20th, and then they come home on the 24th. So this timeline looks perfect. It looks like everything went well. So what happened 3 minutes before landing? They had a lunar module landing error. So this picture on the left is the Apollo 11 lunar module, and inside it is the display, which started showing a bunch of errors 3 minutes before landing. And it was whether they pick, it was a no-go situation. They either land or they abort the mission. So in another world, a less ideal world, in 1969, we wouldn't have landed on the moon. We'd still be chasing that dream of putting someone there, putting a flag there somewhere. But if Loki has an army and the Avengers have the Hulk, we have Margaret Hamilton. So, in 2016, former US President Barack Obama said this during the Presidential Medal of Freedom speech, which Margaret was awarded. And he said, our astronauts didn't have much time, but thankfully they had Margaret Hamilton. She symbolizes the generation of unsung women who helped send humankind into space. Very cool. So I want to also talk about, I want to talk about, this is the main like chunk of the presentation, how Margaret's preparation put us on the moon. So this is her. Don't know if you can see my cursor, but that is her there with her team. And so Margaret normally just anticipates all errors. And then with this specific software for the Apollo 11, she made use of asynchronous programming. So she prepared, since she got a go signal from Apollo 11 failure, she went to town basically. So she made use of asynchronous programming, which I believe she invented herself. Basically, this allowed the in-flight software to handle errors for high priority tasks first, and the lesser priority task errors did not hinder them. So I was really happy reading this, because I'm kind of in a love and hate relationship with asynchronous programming, but realizing now how important it was, and it made us land on the moon, it's so great. I appreciate it more now. So sorry about that. Yeah, so These are her words. She said it got rid of the lesser priority jobs and kept the higher priority jobs, which included the landing functions. So basically, if she didn't put these safeguards in the software, there wouldn't even be an option to land or to abort. It would just be an abort. So it was great that she thought of this in advance, and it's quite literally what put us on the moon. This little anticipation. And then I'm also excited to share with you that the source code for this software is available on GitHub. So if one day you decided you want to fly to the moon, you have the repo, just clone it. Yeah, so what's next? Yeah, so I want to talk about some tech advances that were made possible after the Apollo 11. Firefighter suits, same as astronaut flight suits, improved security systems, solar panels, automatic pool purifiers, shock and heart monitors, pacemaker systems, easier dialysis treatments, and many more. So I thought I should mention all this because you know how on the internet these days you always see people saying, why do we keep sending people to outer space when we still have problems here on Earth? But that is exactly the point. We are sending people out there so we can solve our problems down here. So I think it's really cool. Yeah, so I want to finish this presentation by sharing the quote that we all have heard before. So it says, it's from astronaut Neil Armstrong. He said, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." But he was actually misquoted for this. What he actually said was, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." He insisted that man and mankind were essentially synonyms of each other, and so it wouldn't make sense. So he insisted that this is what he said. He was just misheard. And I was like, okay, I want to make a spin of this quote and say that Margaret Hamilton's contribution to technology is one small step for a woman, one giant leap for womankind. So yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carla. That was fantastic to hear about. And it was only yesterday that I was, myself and one of my colleagues, Doug, were teaching about asynchronous programming in C#. So that was like, oh my God, I never knew this. That was seriously uplifting. And I'm very grateful that we kept you waiting for last. So I'm sorry for having you, on the nervous train so much. But I'm hoping that we have some questions for yourself. No questions. We're just, we're just absolutely mind-blowing, as Philippa is saying. Really well done. And yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing such a positive close to our first in the series of lightning talks celebrating women's contributions in tech, highlighting what whistleblowing can do to us, what our current data that we work with is, and how we can address more of these issues. And yeah, absolutely. Let's come together and make more giant steps for womankind and humankind. I think we should end it there. I've rambled enough. And thank you, James, for supporting us once more.
Yes, thank you.